Hello and welcome to the discussion titled Strategies and Visions for a Post-Capital Society, Movement for Participatory Society and Extinction Rebellion Movement. We are Serbia, ESC volunteers at the Kanal Novinske Mreže, and we would like to welcome our two guest speakers, Matic Primc with us live here and Michel Raffaeli on Zoom. So Matic Primc is a Slovenian activist and organizer. He is part of the Municipalist Assembly movement working on direct democracy as well as environmental issues. Currently he is employed in Organizacija za participatorno društvo as president and project leader. Michele is an Italian activist from Extinction Rebellion. He is currently studying adult education at the University of Bologna. Together, we will address the visions and strategies of participatory society as an alternative to capitalism. We would like you to introduce your organizations, how they came to be, and what they stand for, and then we will ask you some questions. So, who wants to go first? Matic?
Anyway, as was said, I come from Organization for Participatory Society, which is basically an association based here in Maribor. Created to advance ideas that comprise participatory society. So, of course, the next question is, what is a participatory society, right? The participatory society is a concept that was created in the 90s. First was just a participatory economy as a post-capitalist system. And eventually it got built on by many other authors, branching out from economy until it encompassed the whole of society. And the purpose of this is basically to help the left advance its vision beyond just like small corrections to the current system, basically to answer, okay, we know that we hate capitalism, but what are we for? And this is a question that has been, for a long time left unanswered ever since, the 20th century socialism kind of fell out of grace. So there was a search for a new system. And basically participatory society has been looking at why the previous vision failed and has proposed a new vision for a future society which hopefully takes into account the reasons why the socialism didn't work and that could form a working society. And there are four parts to it, although they should hang together, but they're participatory economy, participatory politics, participatory kinship, and participatory community. The one I spend most, or the two I spend most time on is participatory economics and participatory politics, and also the organization for participatory society basically tries to advance these concepts in the real world.
Michele, can you introduce your organization, please?
Yeah. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. First of all, thank you for being invited to this event. And ICSAR, Extinction Rebellion, is a movement that was born in 2018 in the UK from the meeting of a group of scientists that who were tired to talk about climate and ecological crisis and be unheard, and a group of activists with a lot of years of experience. And together, these two groups founded this movement, which is inspired by some of the best practices that activists has experimented along the previous experiences, such as non-violent disobedience, civil disobedience, and also decentralization of power. And XR is also based on all the data that scientists all over the world collected during the years about climate and ecological crisis. The main interlocutor of the movement is the government in which the local group operates. So, for example, for Extinction Rebellion Italy, the interlocutor is the Italian government. And we have 3 requests that are the same in every country. And these 3 requests are to tell the truth. The first one is to tell the truth. The government has to inform the population about the risks that the state of emergency, the climate and ecological emergency, comport. And the second request is to act now in order to stop those actions that are destroying the ecosystems and altering the climate. And the third request, that I think is the most interesting one, is to institute citizens' assemblies in order to guide the government in taking those actions that are necessary to face the crisis we are living. And at the moment, in Italy, there are between 20 and 30 local groups. The first one was founded in 2019, and right now I'm part of the group of Bologna, and I'm coordinating a small newborn group in my hometown in Jesi. And that's it.
Great, thank you very much. So, in an interview on participatory policy, Stephen Shalom argues that when we think of social change, it's not enough to address what is wrong in our current system, as also you were saying right now. So rather we should ask ourselves what kind of world we think is worth fighting for. So I think today we will try all together to visualize concretely what this better world entails. So I will start with a question for Matic. When referring to capitalist economy, we often mention class inequality. Much has been said about the benefits of worker ownership of the means of production. Apart from this, what tools does participatory economy offer to achieve a classless society?
The one class difference that you mentioned has already been identified in the past, right? The old socialist experiments come from this realization, that there are 2 fundamental classes, especially in the economy, the owners and the workers. The owners control property, the workers sell their labor, and this brings conflicts. And the old socialist experiments try to resolve this, by removing the owners, right? And yet still we saw that these societies also developed classes, they call them bureaucratic class or political class, and were basically run not that dissimilarly to the old classes, with some of the worst exploitations removed, right? The analysis that resulted in participatory economy was that there is one class that was forgotten, and that class was not distinct based on the property or labor, but the analysis was that the third class that was also important for achieving classlessness was so-called coordinator class. Sometimes it's called professional managerial class also. And the deal with that class was that it monopolized empowering work. Like in previous panel, we heard that hierarchies appear when the editor has all the information, so even if the other people were supposed to be deciding together, he gets to be the boss or she gets to be the boss, due to the fact that he has or she has access to basically empowering types of work. And In participatory economics, it's structured in a way that we will try to minimize or eliminate this through instituting balanced job complexes, as they're called, where the idea is, not only that we remove the ownership relations, so no more owners, and we institute decision-making power, but we also make sure there is not a certain section of people who monopolize all the empowering work, thus getting informal hierarchical power, even inside formally, equal or democratic bodies. And the idea behind this is that we look at the tasks which are empowering, neutral, or disempowering, and we try to share them around. So in every working collective, we have relatively or approximately equal access to empowering and disempowering work. And in that way, we can actually realize, democratic co-management or self-management that would not produce classes.
To continue talking a little bit about economy. So under capitalist economy, the market does not produce what people actually need, but rather it produces what gives profit to capitalists, who then use their influence to convince consumers to buy unnecessary products. So how does Parecon frame a different mode of production and consumption?
Yeah, so again, it's in Parecon we seek to find the third way, as we think markets are a complete failure, as the ecological collapse proves. Markets working perfectly basically are threatening our own extinction. And the alternative model that was in 20th century socialism was central planning, which also turned out to be bad. But it did prove that planning can work if you have a proper decision-making inside of it, right? So the alternative to markets and central planning is democratic planning, which basically consists of iterative process of negotiation between workers' councils and consumers' councils to try to agree on a society-wide plan, try to negotiate, what do we want to produce, how much do we want to work, what resources do we need to produce, what people want to consume, within the limits that we have democratically set, so for example, no more than X amount of emissions or no more than X amount of some resource used, and within that plan, and we could kind of democratically plan consumption and production in a way that isn't driven by structural impulses like in a market. Market does force companies to compete to each other, and of course this competition forces the companies to try to produce more and more, sell more and more, which leads to totally distorted both production and consumption. And we would put away with these structural incentives because there would be no one actually making a profit out of the production, right? So we would be producing things that people would decide they need. There would be no incentive, for example, to advertise, I don't know, X spray, to convince you you will get more women or whatever. Because even if the collective that produces this would sell 3 times more deodorants, they wouldn't enrich themselves. They would just get more workers, more would be produced, but there would be no benefit to them. So there is no incentive for them to kind of try to push the system in a certain way. And in that way, you don't have dangerous monopolies forming. Because also once you couple participatory economics with participatory politics, you see there is actually no way to turn wealth into political power like it is now. Now the whole system is basically a system for turning, money into political power, which then snowballs. So the participatory planning would effectively eliminate this procedure. Of course, it's quite impossible to explain in any great detail how it would work in this short format. Though it has to be said that it has been tried, it's worked, the computer models that are able to calculate prices on account of negotiations between workers and consumers already exist. So all it needs is implementation in practice.
I will just add something to this. So there is a famous Italian movie called The Working Class Goes to Heaven, and it shows the life of a worker inside a factory that basically reaches first alienation and then completely mental crisis. And you see these engineers of production walking among the workers, producing at extremely fast rhythms. And I think like within Paricom this wouldn't be possible, as worker council would be the ones in charge of defining the rhythm of production. So I think it's also important maybe to underline that the quality of labor and the quality of personal lives within this system is really, really an alternative to what we are experiencing now.
Yeah, also it has to be said, there's this notion, that when you have workers' control of factories, everything will improve. But from examples in the real world, you can see that in the current system, in the market system, when you have workers take over factories, it doesn't turn out this way. They do get to decide, of course, all the aspects, and of course they decide we don't want to work in dangerous conditions, and my arm would be torn off, or we don't have air conditioning or whatever, But as long as they're in the market, if the company that squeezes out most exploitation from the worker, wins in the market. And it turns out when you just put workers deciding in this context, they're just bad at oppressing themselves. So sooner or later they hire someone and put them in an air-conditioned office somewhere, and then that person makes decisions, that makes the workers' lives worse, because that's the only way you can survive in the system that we have. So once you can take incremental steps, but it needs to be the whole system implemented because before the full benefits are realized.
Absolutely, thank you. So Michele, this next one is for you. Extinction Rebellion has calculated that to achieve real structural change, we would need the active engagement of the world population. But as the system we live now of representative democracy really impedes and makes it difficult to achieve this engagement. So how does Extinction Rebellion frames the engagement of society? So if you can tell us more about the citizen assemblies.
Yeah, with pleasure. As you said, institutions and politics is feel more and more as something that does not interest the life of people. I don't know about Slovenia, but during the last political election in Italy, there was an enormous amount of people who simply did not vote. Around 40% of people who had the right simply didn't accept it. And facts like that, but also the growth of populist parties all around the world are symptoms that is something broken in our current political system. And so what XL want to do in order to face the crisis we are living in a way that is accepted by the population and not in an imposing way, because the risk of ecofascism in a crisis that we are living and we are gonna live is a thing that can actually happen. So we need to involve people in in the government, in the participation. We need a more direct democracy. And what XR want to do is to institute a national assembly of citizens. It doesn't have to be a very big assembly, but it must be a representative of the various groups that are present in the population. So you can't simply sort 250 people and that's it. You must select some groups based on gender, age, their geographic provenience, the fact that they live in the countryside or in the cities, and also their level of education. Once you have these groups and these ideal profiles, you can sort people that are related to those profiles. And once they are accepted to be part of this assembly, the people need the citizens involved in the assembly need to be informed, need to educate themselves about the topic of the assembly. And for the assembly we propose is on climate and ecological emergency, but you can do an assembly on big ethical topic as well. So you have to gather people and sort people, and then you have to make them talk and confront with experts in the topic the assembly is about. And so we have this step of education and confront with experts, and then we have another step that is the confrontation with the different stakeholders that are involved in the topic the assembly is about. For example, big corporations or group of activists. You know, you need to gather all the perspectives on the topic in order to have a complex and hopefully a complete vision of the problem. And after this step, after this education and information step, there is the deliberative part. And in this part, it's very important that people talk to each other in a clear and balanced way. There are some facilitators and mediators that assures that the dialogue is balanced. And in this part, people talk in small groups about the ideas they are having and they developed during the educational process. And then they gather again in the plenary assembly to compare their different points of view and to talk about the different solutions that can be implemented in order to face the problem. After this process, there is the deputation that can be conducted in several ways, not just by the simple majority system. And in the end, the assembly should come out with a proposal for the government that has to be considered. I remember that in Danzica, in Poland, they decided that any proposal voted by the 80% of the assembly must be implemented by the local government. In Italy, the proposal we are making right now is that from the end of the assembly, the government has 3 months of time in which read and discuss the outcome of the assembly. And then they must let the population know if they're gonna accept the outcome of the assembly or reject it, but giving the specific reasons about the choice.
Thank you for that. So, as we saw what Extinction Rebellion sees participation, how does your organization imagine participation in the process of political decision making?
Yeah, so basically the political system is conceived as a network, basically a network of nested councils, basically inverted pyramid scheme where the most local, it's also based on basically people's assemblies, we call them councils, and they would start at the local level, which would have the highest decision-making power, and then and this could be, like assembly representing a street or maybe even smaller unit, and they would have devolved power to decide everything about the area they are in, but also when you go to to wider geographical areas, a lot of these assemblies would have to, or councils would have to kind of collaborate or decide together because it affects all of them. It would have a second tier body where they would meet, debate, even propose decisions, but those decisions could still be overruled by the lower bodies. And this, in like 4 steps, you could reach the level of a country. And in this way, we could have like a direct democratic way to basically make political decisions. Of course, the principles that guide this sort of organizations are twofold. One is, again, we want to have classlessness, so no more political class like there was in old socialist countries. And the other one is the principle of self-management, which means, that people should have the say in decisions to the degree that they're affected by decisions, right? So basically, people in a certain geographical area should have highest decision-making power for that geographic area, right? But once you go out, you have smaller proportion of power and more people have to come together to actually make decisions. So this would be transferable basically at every level. It could go to an international level as well, and of course to the everyone would be part of the like street council or the smallest level councils, but they would have recallable delegates to the upper councils, right, who would only represent their views, and they could be overruled or recalled at any time. So it's not like we have politicians that could make decisions. It would just send a representative to a next level body to represent them, but decisions would still be made at the lowest level or left to the highest level if they decided that it would be fine.
But how are decisions made? How do they decide on what laws or what processes are they gonna take?
It's as you imagine, in an assembly, people would come, the issues would be put on the agenda, they would be debated, proposals would be floated, and then they would be voted on, right? The principle that should always apply is again, the decisions, people should have decision-making power to the degree that they're affected. So even in a certain council, not all decisions would be decided by, say, majority. You could have some decisions that would require, higher levels of majority, 2/3, 3/4, who knows, 80%, like it was mentioned, depending on the democratic decision that the council itself makes for a certain type of decisions. Right? So it would still be voting, except it wouldn't always be, majority wins. Some in cases, it would need to be super majority that overrules the minority also.
So let's move on to kinship and community. Are the current structures and institutions of kinship, such as marriage and family, problematic per se, or are they salvageable if freed from capitalist and patriarchal elements in the vision of the society, participatory society?
Yeah, here the answers are less clear. Certainly there are problems with the way we have these institutions now. So, marriage is right now, more like an economic contract that serves as a disciplining tool, that prevents spouses from leaving each other when they're not happy in the marriage, or whatever. So in this form, we would not like to keep it, but if it's just a symbolic act, affirming a bond, or, I don't know, as a gesture of love or companionship, I suppose there would be no problems with it, right? The idea is, that people would be free to associate or disassociate from people without being constrained, by the legal system, by like judgment of their peers, economic considerations, and other factors, because right now marriage, for example, brings a lot of legal rights and obligations with it. For example, you are bound to your partner. They have to kind of, you have commonwealth, and if you are in a situation where you have no income, you have strong incentive not to leave, because then you will not be able to survive on your own. So maybe in a more just society, this wouldn't be a problem. So we would have to see. But still, in a just society, you would need these provisions, because people would be able to sustain themselves. And also, on the other hand, the family family should exist, but it depends what it's meant, because family is not just, like your feelings. It has legal connotations and bonds that also constrain what is meant by it. And right now, what we perceive as family is so-called nuclear family, like closest blood relatives, so parents and their children, basically. And we feel that is just too narrow. There is this problem, you don't choose your family, so in a way, when you have society structured that kind of enforces this kind of social organization, again, you may be left with people who are abusing you, and they have legal rights over you despite that, and the society will not consider your family, someone that you really like to be with, that you have feelings for, that, but are not your blood relatives or whatever. So I feel that family should be more loosely defined, should be less strictly boxed in by the society. And of course, when I say society, it's always like the legal system that's supported, enforced basically by force, like all legal systems, and the society that's basically indoctrinated and socialized around this concept, that then also provides the soft pressure, for you to conform to this idea of what a proper family should be. So now we had, or still have, this idea, that two men and an adopted child, are not a proper family or something, because the social pressure is brought onto this. So we feel that the family should still exist, of course, but it should be more loosely defined. May include your, non-blood related people that you choose to associate it, not just the people you happen to be blood related to, and you have no way to influence.
Sorry, can you add something about community? Because I feel, from what I understand, that community is not just just intended as the ones that belong to your same class or your same gender or race or sexual orientation. So in this sense, the solidarity among people that share a similar experience. But then it becomes, it then reaches a larger kind of spectrum. And I feel if we associate this like wider vision of community together with mutual participation in worker councils or in the nested councils, I feel that this leads to interaction of different fragments of society. And this, again, maybe enriches the collective political experience. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Or
yeah, I think this instinct is correct. I can't say with any authority, but you know, we know from experiments in the past or real life experience that when people work together, from different groups work together on a shared goal, these divisions between them, grow less and less and sometimes disappear, and people kind of relate to them not just across communities, but become part of the same wider community, even though they may be part of some sub-communities, right? So to the point that they're given equal treatment to each other. I mean, this effect needs to be achieved, like the main problems of inter-community relations, forms of bigotry, racism, sexism, and you can be part of, ageism, whatever, you can be part of many communities in your life, and in some of them, you are treated as an outcast, in some of them you blend in, you're part of the kind of accepted group. And yeah, of course, when you have these structures, when people have to kind of collaborate, work together in these assemblies, it is expected, that these divisions, will be reduced. I wouldn't say eliminated, a lot more has to be done in that regard, and all the ways are not yet clear. We think, that a lot can be done by having societal processes that work the same way for everyone. For example, in doing things, everyone needs to be doing, like commoning some services, so that everyone participates in them, and other ways, where people get equal access to some life's amenities, which would kind of, help to foster this equality. And a lot has to be done through the education and socialization as well, so that might be a longer process.
Right, so Michele, please give us your opinion regarding this, because from what I understand about Extinction Rebellion, one very important element is regenerative culture. So how does Extinction Rebellion rethink or reimagines communal ties under the framework of regenerative culture?
Well, okay. Yeah, regenerative culture is something that we want to build together in order to face the toxic system we are living in. And we believe that this system in which we are living is toxic equally for the planet and as well for relations. So, in our visions, relations are a crucial element because we can see them as a key, equally to understand the world, but also to transform it. And when we look for a system change, we look for a change in relations, and so in a big perspective, we can achieve this with, for example, deliberative democracy. But if you look at the microsystem, we have to focus our attention on the net of relations we are already in. And I can give you some examples from the XR groups, because when we talk about relations, we talk about also organizations and also on power. So, for example, in XR, the power is decentralized as much as possible. So the coordinators of the local groups or the working groups are in that role for a maximum of 6 months in order to share the power and also the knowledge and the responsibilities that that role implies. Moreover, in our groups, we use facilitation as a powerful tool to let the collective energy emerge. I don't know if you are familiar with this concept, but to say in a few words, facilitation is, you can concretize facilitation by paying attention to, for example, the speaking turns when you are doing a meeting, or time one person is speaking, the way the power is balanced inside the group, and also the attention we give through facilitation to our feelings. A practice that we always do at the beginning of meetings, we call check-in, is 1 or 2 minutes per person to tell the group how that person feels in that day, how that person is coming to the meeting, in order to have care of our feelings and needs. It's not something like a psychotherapy process, because it's very, very short, but it's useful to create a familiar environment, and we always try to keep this climate of acceptance and non-judgment. And we also have this attention to feelings and needs, equally psychological and physical, because during the actions that we do, for example, when we block a street or we block traffic, we can feel very stressed and overwhelmed by the situation we are facing. For this reason, there are always some individuals which are responsible of the well-being of the activists, and they always have some food with them, they always have some water, and they often create a safe space in which you can go to rest for a bit maybe, and to have a regenerative talk with someone, and to let your level stress go down for a bit. And you know, in this system, we are pushed to perform no matter what. No? So I think that in this way, in this mentality, this mentality is very powerful in alienating us from our sensations, and by doing that, we as a species we start to look more like machines and robots than the humans we actually are. Okay, and this alienation is also dangerous because it makes us consider the other living beings as objects to exploit, or pets, but not as individuals that are part of a bigger and wider net in which we are also involved. I want to share with you just another practice we do sometimes that is called the Council of All the Living Beings. And it consists in trying to impersonate a particular animal of the environment we are in that moment. And so we have like 10 or 20 minutes to impersonate that living being, trying to see the world with its eyes. And then we come back in the circle and we share what we think and feel now that we are impersonating that living being. And the last time I did it, we were in the front of the city hall in Venice. And we did it before leaving messages for the mayor. So the mayor that day received messages from worried citizens, but also from citizens that try to look at the world, at that environment with the eyes of other living beings. So we try to let the measure know also some other perspectives, some other ways of feeling the reality and see. That's it.
I will maybe ask for just something more. I think what, and please correct me if I'm wrong, what this kind of exercise, they are beneficial not because we are taking the voices of the organisms, or living beings as you call them, but rather to remind ourselves and others, as in this case the mayor of Venice, of our role in the environment and our responsibility. And yeah, I don't think the way XR intends it is for you to become the voice bearers of the ecosystem, because maybe that would be a bit problematic. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, we don't want to impersonate, really impersonate those perspectives. What we want to do with this type of exercise is to try to expand our awareness about how our choices impact in the ecosystem, and so the responsibility that are connected to our choices, and more than that, the choices of government and institutions.
Thank you for that. So we now want to move on the strategies, because we were mostly talking about visions. So what are your organizations currently doing to achieve these visions of post-socialist society?
So anyway, as I explained, you know, the Participatory Society is kind of a complete system. So it's quite hard, you know, to kind of realize parts of it in this current system. But we do try to find, you know, niches where this can be actualized. So we fight for some policies or practices, you know, that exist in this world, which could be seeds, you know, from which the new world will spring. So, for example, we spend a lot of time fighting for and developing participatory budgeting as a sort of kind of collective economic planning, you know, for collective consumptions, you know. So in this process, you know, people in the municipality come together and decide collectively through direct democratic processes, you know, what they would like to see built, repaired, carried out in their communities, you know, to improve their living conditions. And we think these processes are good from a couple of perspectives. You know, one is just practicing, you know, for direct democracy, you know, people do make decisions and they have to get used to it, because in our lives, you know, we are rarely asked about anything, and this is one of the very few things where you actually get to have a democratic say and actually decide on, you know, what regards public matters. And also, on the other hand, this also kind of enables the collective consumption, which is seriously you know, held back in capitalism, which is all about individual consumption, you know, actualizing yourselves and whatever, you know, and there's very few on kind of collective consumption of things, which is, you know, both more economically and ecologically efficient, right? So you can achieve a much higher standard of living by collective consumption than by individual consumption with the same amount of resources. That's one that we work on. The other one is we try to find kind of push or convince people to adopt some of the societal forms that we would like to see. So one is non-hierarchical structures, which we try to input into activist groups or even cooperatives, because they are democratic institutions, but normally they're not run without hierarchies, even though they're supposed to be. And in cooperatives, for example, these forms of organization can take place and do take place. And they're also conducive to establishing these balanced job complexes, which are not so unknown because they do exist even in current society, especially in areas where the people are very precariously employed, and they always cover for each other, and a lot of times everyone gets involved in decision making, so also shares decision making powers, not just roles. It's not yet widespread, but you can see it within some NGOs that work in this fashion. So what we do, we try to foster these processes, advise people how to do it ourselves. Like in a housing cooperative that we are planning, we do plan to do it in regards to these processes. And also a lot of time is spent just raising consciousness about this, because if people don't know, not even about the problems, that we're trying to solve, much less than the solutions, it's not going to get anywhere, because to institute this new society is going to require huge numbers of people, and there is a lot of education that needs to be done before we get to that point. So right now we're doing pilot projects on a small scale, pending, wider mobilization, people actually deciding they want to have society along those lines.
About this, I have something again maybe to comment. I was reading a while ago on the Journal of Civil Society an article by a French author, which now I don't remember his name, but he was arguing that, of course, he didn't question the benefits of like participatory planning or budgeting, but he was saying that more and more private companies and institutions are like stealing are appropriating themselves of these democratic tools, but again, within the current system of capitalism, these can be more like damaging than other because they still promote this individual center or this narrow individual benefit. So if you have any response to that.
Yeah, it's kind of natural, because these non-hierarchical ways of working, organizing, are actually much more efficient than hierarchical ones. There's actually a name for this. It's called the Hawthorne effect. It's like the rise of productivity when you make people equal. The problem is, and why this is not everywhere, is because you have to institute this very carefully if you want to still have a dominant position over everything. So you have to find a way how to get people, to collaborate in a very narrow way, equally, while you're still the owner, the manager, and you have all the overarching decision-making power, And when you're trying to get, both of these, it's very hard to do it, So it's not very widespread, So it's now it's used in more creative industries, because they figure the rise in productivity in these high value added branches, is most important, gives you the most benefit, not so much as in like a chair factory or something. And they do it very carefully, they also gamify it, but they insulate it very well, from like higher level decision making powers that maybe affect the entire plant. So people engaging this don't get the ideas, that maybe we could run the whole plant by ourselves. So they're doing it very carefully, but the fact that they're doing it is the proof, basically it works. Even capitalists who want to really maintain the hierarchical structure, and their domination, are forced to kind of do it, you know, because you can't completely ignore the ways of working that actually are more productive.
Sorry, Michele, back to you for the same question.
So what is your organization currently doing to achieve the visions of post-capitalist society?
I think we can tell that the principal way that XR has to carry on our vision is through non-violent direct action and civic disobedience. We found it out with research done by the professor of Harvard, Erika Sinobel, that non-violence is more effective than violence, although many people can think contrary. In her research, she studied more than 200 cases of mass movements trying to achieve impunity in the last century, and she discovered that non-violence was twice more effective than violence. And this can be explained with some factors like, first of all, you have to consider that if you want to do a violent campaign, you need well-prepared fighters and a lot of money to invest in weapons and very complex strategy. And this simple thing excludes several people from participating to the actions, because you have to be held and in a certain body, to fight, to engage a violent fight. Moreover, often the military forces that a government counts on are way more strong and organized than spontaneous one. And once you are seen by the government as a dangerous and violent movement, it's very easy for the army police to suppress it. So we want to be a non-violent movement because almost everyone can participate to non-violent actions, and this is a very important theme for and a very important factor for a movement that wants to be a mass movement. Moreover, when you are seen by the population with favor, like a performer that has a value and a message to bring and to share, people may be sympathetic with you, may be comprehensive, and may want to join you. We try to do actions that are very colorful and that involves people, and some of the action we do almost look like a party, an improvised party on the streets, and this is very good to it's very nice to see the people reaction. Sometimes they actually join us because it seems a party, and we have also a message to share. And if you are seen with favor by the public, people will be more attracted by your movement. And maybe the policemen themselves will not suppress you as easily without creating discontent. And also, if the public has a good consideration of your movement, you may not need an enormous amount of people manifesting. You know, an interesting outcome from the Sinoweb research is that every campaign that managed to involve the 3.5% of the population in their protests claim their goals. But if they have the support of the rest of the population. And I invite you to take a look at the TED Talk of Erika Sinoweb, because it's very surprising how the non-violent method of fighting is actually very efficient.
Yes, just a brief comment, and I think that if you follow, for example, the pages of Extinction Rebellion in the UK, you see this aspect that you were mentioning now about different age groups or different type of population like being involved, and it's really impactful to see the I don't know how to elderly being arrested for blocking roads non-violently and police being brutal. So yeah, maybe this can, I don't know, you made me think about this aspect. And also you said sometimes your actions looks like parties. I think, yeah, you were referring to the latest action that Extinction Rebellion had in Bologna. But I also, maybe you can give us a very brief comment about the artistic side of the non-violent protest, because this is the first thing that I noticed when I first saw Extinction Rebellion protest in the city center, and I think it's quite rare. And when we were discussing you and me the other day, you were saying how important it is for people to notice you when you are doing something in the street. And I think you can maybe tell us about this, like bringing the casket and dressing up as ghosts. Yeah, just briefly though.
Briefly. Yeah, we were doing a march of the extinct souls, and we were all dressed in white, and our face was painted in white, and we were some paper with our title as an extinct soul. For me, I was, for example, a soul of one of the trees that were destructed by some environmental tornadoes that we had in 2008. And we did this march, and the people around us were seriously taken by what we were doing. Some of them, I saw them crying. Some of them were just making jokes in order to keep distance between the things that were happening along the streets. Because I think an action like that is really shocking and can cause pain. And after that, we did a die-in, which is like a sit-in, but you're not sitting, you pretend to be died in the street. And after that, after a brief theater moment, we came up again and we removed our white clothes. And in that moment, we were all colorful, and we started to dance. And there was this shift of climate, of atmosphere, because before we were solemn and sad and almost ghosts, yeah. And then, after the performance of the theater groups, we started living again with music and drums, and then we went to under the city hall of Bologna, and we started doing some speeches addressed to the government, and we had the attention of a lot of people who were, what's going on here? What's happening? They were very curious about us.
Right, thank you. So I will ask you a last question to the both of you. So to rethink our societies, we often draw from many different cultural backgrounds. For example, the indigenous groups struggle in Latin America, or Chiapas, or Java. Some people have criticized participatory economy and Western activism in general by arguing that it represents an Eurocentric worldview. So how do your organization and your projects address this criticism, and how would you make sure you are negotiating with other cultural contexts or contexts where people approach politics or social issues in a different way?
What we try to do with Participatory Society is kind of create a scaffold of values. So for example, we would like to have like diversity, efficiency, classlessness, as values. And we propose institutions that might achieve those values. But if there's, okay, and we think this will work in the culture we know, we live in, or the authors of this live in, the original authors are from the United States. But in case someone finds, institutions that would achieve the same end in a different cultural context, we're fine with it, but if the values are not the same, then we just wouldn't accept it, for example, I don't know, in India, they would like to retain their caste system, that have a participatory society. Well, I've got no patience for that, so obviously they're not trying to achieve the same goal, and they might have a different society, okay, fine with me, if they choose to do so, right? But it wouldn't be participatory society.
Get it?
Yeah, I have just two things to say in this topic. And one thing is that Pixar has these 10 principles that are pretty inclusive principles, and they are like a light version of a constitution of the movement. And once you accept those principles that you can decline in the way you prefer, respecting your context, you can act in the movement name. And another thing I want to say that I think it's all about how you pose, not you pose, but you see yourself. If you behave in a humble way, in a way that it's propedeutic to learning, it's good, because in that way you can learn. We in Bologna have this relation with the Eco-Mapuche Association, and we are learning from the Eco-Mapuche people that are actually at the moment living in Bologna, some of their strategies and something about their culture, and we are trying to learning and respecting that culture, and that those suggestions that they have for us, and we trying to make a treasure of them. So yeah, I think it's all about being in a learning, reciprocal learning relations with other culture and groups that are not from the same perspective that we are.
All right. So thank you very much. Matic had to leave to go and catch our next speaker. But we would like to thank him and Michele for being with us and sharing with us your insights, and instinct maybe. And we hope that you enjoyed the conversation, and that maybe we throw some attention on the potential that participation has in the dismantling of post-capitalist structures. No, society, in the making of post-capitalist societies. So yeah, follow their projects and their works, I guess, on social media and website of Extinction Rebellion. And yeah, thank you very much, Michele. So yeah, now we will serve some delicious vegan lunch, and after lunch break we will host a conversation with Peter Bommer, who will inform us on the relevance of life and work of Howard Zinn. And Lev Centri is going to present a Slovenian translation of A People's History of the United States. Thank you again, and see you later in 15 minutes. All right, see you in 15 minutes. Thank you.